My name's Sue. I grew up as a youngest of four children. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was a traveling salesman. We didn't know the Lord. My mom would maybe take us to Christmas or Easter, but they didn't have a relationship with the Lord, nor did any of us. Some high school friends took me to church various times throughout my teen years. So I had at times seen church people and kind of saw one young lady. She had something that was so captivating, a joy that I saw in her face. I said, I wanted what she had, but I didn't know how to get it, and I didn't know what that was. In my junior year, I met what I would say would be my knight in shining armor, a young man a year older than me. He treated me like a princess. He came from a strong standing family in the community. We became high school sweethearts. My own father struggled with addiction issues, rage issues. Because of his traveling, I felt just a real vacant hole in my heart from a lack of a father figure. And the father I did know was harsh, dismissive. I felt invisible. So when I met my knight in shining armor, this young man, we became high school sweethearts. It was like a sweet balm over my heart. We fell in love. We dated. He went off to college. We kept our relationship going. And then when I went to college, I chose the same college. We lived in the same co-ed dorm. It was a large university. Prior to that time, we had been pure. But when I was in college, succumbed to temptation, I made one mistake, and time passed, and suddenly I began to get nauseous in the morning. This was my freshman year in college. And I was thinking, well, I must have the flu, but I had no fever. But I felt so sick in the morning. And a couple of weeks passed, and I still felt sick. And the thought dawned on me, oh my goodness, could I be pregnant? I talked to my boyfriend. He's like, Sue, no way. There's just no way that could have happened. It was just one mistake. And, but as the nausea continued, we made it. He said, oh, we'll put your mind at ease. We'll go to the campus women's center and get a pregnancy test. We went there, and our worst fear was confirmed. I was told I was pregnant. I was 18 years old, a freshman in college. When I left for college, my mom left my father under very traumatic circumstances, so I was already reeling from the knowledge that my mother was gone. And now I found out I'm pregnant. We didn't know what to do. We felt like our whole world was imploding on us. It felt like life was ending. And his family was so upstanding in the community. It's like, I can't tell my parents. I don't know what they'd do to me. They'd probably kick me out of the house. It'll bring so much shame. I couldn't approach my father. I really had no relationship with him at that point. I didn't want to talk to friends because I thought, I hear him just starting in college. Who do I have to talk to? I feared shame and rejection. We were trying to think, what are we going to do? Within a couple of days, my boyfriend came to me, said, let's have a talk. He presented me with a pamphlet on abortion. He had gone back to the women's center and talked to the staff there. And he told me, I think we should have an abortion. I think that's what we should do. What else are we going to do? We have no money to support a baby. And though my initial thought when I was pregnant was just tremendous fear, and felt like fear was just consuming me, and panic, almost like blacking. It was just so, but there was a part in my heart that there was a little spark, like, I'm pregnant. But when my boyfriend said we should just have an abortion, I just listened to that, and my fear consumed that little spark of I'm pregnant with, I need to get rid of this problem. What we did was December 17th of 1980. I'll never forget that day. We lied to my dad, my parents, even though my mom had left my dad at Christmas time. We planned to all get together as a family just to have a semblance of a Christmas. But I was on Christmas break and I lied to my parents and I said, I'm going Christmas shopping with my boyfriend. But lo and behold, we drove the hour-and-a-half drive back to the town of our large university to the women's center, and I had an abortion. I'll never forget that day. It was evening. We were nervous. We drove in there. All the women gathered there were chatting nervously. The counselors were people my age. I was 18, but they looked like they may be in their 20s. I go, it's a glob of pregnancy tissue. No worries. It's early. You can have an abortion. You're going to be better for it. Problem solved. And I took the rhetoric. They said it was a glob of cells. It was just tissue. I didn't meet the doctor until I was in a gown on the procedure table. But then he shoves a cruel instrument into my womb and sucks out what I later found out was my baby. And that little baby was 6 weeks old. But its heartbeat began 23 days after conception, and later when I went to nursing school, which I went to college for, in gestational booklets, I learned that. I don't know how long it went on, but I heard the loud suctioning. I saw the blood in the tube. I wondered if I'd see body parts, though I was told, I think there's an inner part in all women put by Creator God, who says, I set eternity in the heart of man, a divine sense of God that nothing under the sun can fulfill but Him. We have a conscience. And though we like to numb it out, my conscience was saying, it's a baby. And after it was over, I was just kind of ushered into a room, laid on a recliner, offered juice and crackers as if nothing had happened. But all the ladies there were so quiet, so deathly quiet. My boyfriend took me home. We drove in silence. In fact, we never spoke about it, ever. It's like an unspoken, we won't speak about that. I remember having my post-abortion procedure instructions about worrying about infection or things that can happen afterwards. And I remember going to my room and going up and tacking them on my bulletin board, hoping someone would find those, hoping my mother would see that. She didn't. The close of my vacation, I crumpled that up and threw it in the trash. It was something I wasn't going to think about again. Prior to the abortion, I was a A.B. student council, marched in the band. In fact, I was homecoming queen. I don't know why I was chosen for that, but I was. After the abortion, suddenly I began to party. I began to drink alcohol, began to numb out. I began to be promiscuous. My boyfriend and I, we always wrote in our letters when he went off to college and when I went to follow him there, we always say 4 years, like we're going to get married. We're going to have the little house with the picket fence. But after the abortion, our relationship imploded within maybe months. Couldn't handle the weight of what we'd done, now, even though we didn't talk about it. It was just a lot of guilt and shame, sadness, and it felt like the day after, like there was just a black hole. All these emotions were so painful. I felt like I couldn't handle it, and which is, I found out later, was common to many women. So figuratively speaking, I stuffed all the shame, guilt, pain, regret into a box, tamped down the lid, walked it down into the cellar of my heart, shoved it in that dark corner, turned my back, walked up the steps, locked the door, threw away the key. I just couldn't handle it. And I was not going to look at it. And I conveniently forgot I had an abortion. So after a period of 7 years, I was on a family vacation again. My parents were separated, but we periodically patched it together for family trips. And I was home on a vacation, and God arranged for my path to cross with a man. We're on a lake, and he was walking by, and he struck up a conversation, and he turned out he only lived 40 minutes away. Always was just a friend, but he was a ferocious believer in Jesus Christ, and I didn't know the Lord at that time. He struck up a friendship, and he treated me like a woman of worth and value. He shared the gospel with me. He talked about Jesus like Jesus was his best friend. Like he really knew. I was like, wow. I was just so struck by that. Thought, man, this guy acts like he really knows his Jesus. And I didn't really fully understand all about Jesus, but he was faithful over a period of 3 years to share who Jesus was and the love of God. And I remember one night after another failed dating relationship, I was so broken down. I remember coming to a point where I was ready to give Jesus a try, so to speak. I called my friend Tom up. I said, Tom, I don't know if Jesus is even really true, but if he is, I'm ready to ask Jesus into my heart. He explained that's what you do. And he led me in a prayer, and I remember praying. I remember the exact spot on the floor, talking with, it was a landline at the time, and talking to my friend. And I remember saying, Jesus, I don't know if you're real, but if you are, please come into my heart and save me. Please rescue me. I want to follow you. And he led me through that prayer. And that day I gave my life to Christ. And that's when my life began to change. And God began to set up things. He already had been working all my life, but he began to, turned out right after I got saved, my friend Tom lived 40 minutes away, so I wasn't going to his church. But there was another nurse that I worked with, and she said, hey, Sue, I'm going to be visiting churches because I really want to get back to church. She said, would you like to come and go to church with me? And I'm like, would I? And so we began searching for a church, and I found it. We found a church home, and there it was there that I met surrogate moms and dads that took me under their wing. And I felt so loved, and I had a Bible study and began to grow in the love of God. And it was after one night, it was 3 years after getting saved that the Lord said, okay, we've got to deal with this seller. So he arranged circumstances to me to break through my denial because it was so thick. But it was after one Bible study. I was driving home, and on the side of the berm, it was around 8 o'clock at night when it's dark in the wintertime, and there was a stumbling figure. And I remember feeling this compelling urge, like, you need to go and explore. Who is this? What do they need? And as a young 26-year-old at the time, that was kind of odd as a single person to pull over and explore who this stumbling figure is. But I could not escape that compelling urge. I pulled over into this parking area, and it turned out to be a woman stone drunk. She agreed to be driven home. We got there, put on a pot of coffee for her. She was bawling her eyes out, and she confessed she said, I lost a 29-year-old son. She was just crying. I don't remember the circumstances of her son's death, but God was allowing me to witness a mother's grief over her child. And I tried to comfort her and console her as much as I could. And I told her about our church and gave her my number. And at the time I had to leave because I was working the next day. I was a nurse at that time. And she blurted out when I was getting ready to leave, I had an abortion. Do you think my son's death was because of my abortion? When she said the word abortion, it's like that box, the lid to the box in my heart blew open. Abortion. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I told the woman, I had an abortion too. And what God did was, like, he pulled that lid off, and what I looked in and saw in my box was my own broken, shattered heart. Nothing I could ever do would bring back my child. The woman and I wept bitterly together. After that, I called my pastor up and I shared my story, and thank God. He's like, Sue, that's a grievous sin. But you know what? If you confess your sin, God is faithful and just to forgive your sin and cleanse you from all unrighteousness. 1 John 1:9. And he went through other scriptures with me, and I confessed my sin. I received forgiveness. And he goes, Sue, so happens my wife is the director of a pregnancy resource center, and they have a post-abortion recovery group. Would you like her to call you? And I said, yes. So happened. This is all God, God's compassion. And with fear and trepidation, I signed up for the group because it was scary. It was scary to confront that. And I reach out to you ladies that might be watching and you're afraid. But I'm going to tell you, Jesus Christ is tender. He's compassionate. He'll handle your heart with such tender care. I signed up for the group, and the group was called Forgiven and Set Free. And the motto of the group is, you shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And I came to know the truth, Jesus Christ, in the most intimate and personal way through that group, as he put my heart back together, piece by loving peace. And the women in the group became Jesus in the flesh to me, so to speak, as they loved me. And we went through the Bible together, embracing the truth, repenting, and basically going through the grief process. That book is tremendous. I would highly recommend that Bible study booklet, Forgiven and Set Free by Linda Cochran. One night I was praying on my bed at night, not even thinking about the abortion, when we had just gone through the Bible study about forgiving and acknowledging your loss and letting go. And the women in the group and the lay leader said, this would be a time to name your child, because we were preparing for a memorial. And she said, some women get a sense of the gender, doesn't make sense. But God, God knew your child, because Jeremiah 5 says, before I formed you in the womb, God knew you. So God knows you. But I thought, Lord, I'm not going to make up a name, because I just didn't feel good about that. I said, if you want to reveal it to me, please do. And I was praying on my bed one night, not even thinking about my abortion, just praying. And suddenly in my mind's eye, this image of this beautiful blonde, blue-eyed boy came running to me. And he was about waist high, and he looked up at me and he said, Mommy, I love you. And immediately in my heart, the name Stephen, and I saw it clearly, Stephen, dropped in my heart. And in my heart, I knew this was my child. And I'm not saying that I had contact with the spirit of my child, but I feel like God was giving me this image, and I held him and I rocked him, and I just, the tears, like the dam broke as tears of grief, and all this stored grief just was flowing down my face. I held him and I rocked him, and I just kept crying and cried and cried. Felt like it would never end, but it was so cleansing and so purging. And I said, I remember looking at him, I said, do you forgive me? And he said, of course I do, Mommy. I love you. I remember that face just like it was yesterday. And peace just dropped in my heart. That's when I told my pastor later. I had to update him on everything that had been going on in my group and this experience. And he said, Sue, I'd like to offer a private memorial for you. He offered to meet with an older woman after choir one night, to just the three of us, to have a private memorial. He read scriptures, and we honored the life of Stephen. And at the end of the memorial, he said with a glint in his eye, because Sue, I don't know if you know this, but my son's name is Stephen. I was blown away that God, in his compassion, would put it on my pastor's heart to offer this memorial, and his own son's name was Stephen. I was catapulted to new levels of just the love of God. Well, it was nearing our own post-abortion group's memorial, and we decided we were going to plant a tree to symbolize that despite our children's tragic deaths, God could still create new life and give us new beginnings. And so a church nearby had agreed. The pastor said, sure, you can plant your tree near the children's ministry area playground. And so we met the last group, and we all brought little booties, or I brought a song I had written for him and his name plaque, which means crowned one. And we all put it in a shoebox, buried these mementos to our children. And we went to the church and we dug a deep hole, put the box there, covered it with dirt, and gathered round with hands interlinked and saying, Jesus loves the little children. We committed our hearts anew to Christ and thanked him for the redemption that he brought to us. And I remember it was at that moment, standing in a circle around our newly planted rose of Sharon bush, that I felt like God showed me that box again, the box that had been in the cellar, that had had the broken heart, but it was empty. My heart had been mended, and it had been given wings to fly. And I knew the truth that those who are free in Christ are free indeed. And not only that, but within 2 years after that group, God brought another Stephen into my life, and this was to be my husband. God actually plucked him from Arizona, dropped him in the city I was living in Ohio, and he happened to open a Yellow Pages booklet and said, you know, he was in school at the university at the time, and he said, I'm going to visit this church, and I happen to be singing offertory. And he said, I'm going to meet that woman. And later, within a year or two, we got married. And what was so cool was within maybe another year or two, he felt this drawing in his own spirit to go back to his spiritual roots. So he said, Sue, I'd really like to visit this other church. Would you be willing to go? How do you feel about that? And I said, well, yeah, honey, if that's your leading, I'm happy to go visit. And little would you know that the church we pulled up that he had chosen was the very church where my son's memorial was. Holy God. We visited the church, and it was confirmed that that was where we were to plant and to serve. And because of the amazing nature of my child's memorial at the back of the church, I shared that with that pastor. And little would you know that he'd say, I would love for you to share this story on Right to Life Sunday. So there I did. I shared the story of my child, Stephen, at the very church where the memorial was planted. And I thought, isn't that like God, the Redeemer, the Restorer? And since that day, just to testify to his goodness, he led me to write that story. It was published in a Christian magazine. I sent it, got on the radio drama Unshackled. I then began to speak. I then became the coordinator of Abortion Recovery Ministry. That I was blessed to have 2 children of my own, and they are gifts of God. My husband has spiritually adopted my child is waiting for me in heaven. My sons know about my child and their half-brother. Our family has used this story as a platform to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. He came to set captives free. He values little babies in the womb. He values your life. He wants to redeem your life. He wants to bring people into abundant life that's only found in him. So if I were to talk to anyone considering abortion, I would say choose life. Your life matters. Your child's life matters. If you can't care for the child, there's adoption. If you carry it and you come to the point, I even bore my child, I'm overwhelmed, there's safe haven laws in all 50 states. You can surrender a child up to 30 days after birth even, and it will be at a fire station or a hospital, be cared for, it will be adopted. I know my best friend intercessor good friend. She adopted a child that her birth mother was at the clinic, changed her mind, and now she is the beautiful mother of that child. She said, he's a strapping 17-year-old man full of destiny, and it ended 7 years of her infertility pain. There are families waiting, craving, desiring to have your child. If you can't care for it, you can give it up for adopted. You can give it to Safe Haven. And then pregnancy resource centers. I have another friend who was a single woman and in difficult circumstances, but she chose to parent her child. Pregnancy resources centers offer free resources, parenting classes, community services, diapers, formula, parenting classes, discipleship. So life, and you won't go down the same path. Post-abortive women suffer depression, grief, guilt, regret. Many suffer flashbacks, infertility. I had breast cancer. There's a breast cancer link. You don't want to do that. Don't go that path. It's only death, destruction. Choose life. And to those who have had abortion, God, his arms stretch east to west, as far as east is from the west. If you confess your sin, he will remove it from you and cleanse you whiter than snow. You don't have to be like me and speak your testimony out to thousands or hundreds of people or write stories, but it will allow you to be a better mom. Let him heal you. There's supportafterabortion.com. There's optionline.org to follow those. There's Krista Elijah's ministry. There's all kinds of ministries out there. There's healing for you. Get healed. Get whole. Let him let you be a good mom. God's healed me. It's been painful. I'm 61. I had the birth of 2 grandbabies. There's still layers of healing. Abortion doesn't end then. There's layers of healing. But I keep coming higher and higher. I am healed, but it doesn't mean I don't grieve. I remember my child and I honor my child. So I want to give you encouragement. If you've had abortion in your past, no matter whether it's 1 or 4, there's healing for you. There's cleansing for you. There's purpose for you. Don't let the devil clamp you down and shut your mouth.